Hello, everyone. My name is Thomas Kukel from Kukel Consulting. Welcome to our website where you can find a lot of relevant articles about COAs. And one of them is article number 3, which I will read today: Why COAs are key to understanding the patient experience beyond clinical biomarkers. Introduction. Drug development has historically relied on biomarkers and clinical tests to show whether treatment works. These measures are essential, but they do not fully capture how illness and its treatment affects people's daily lives. COAs, or clinical outcome assessments, especially patient-reported outcomes, bridge the gap by turning aspects of the patient's experience into structured, analyzable data. This article explains why biomarkers alone are not enough, how COAs capture dimensions of health that laboratory measures miss, provides examples across indication, and outlines practical steps to integrate COAs into routine trial practice. The limits of biomarkers alone. Biomarkers are measurable indicators of biological processes such as blood pressure, tumor size, or HbA1c. They are often objective, sensitive, and relatively easy to standardize across sites. However, the relationship between a biomarker and how a patient actually feels or functions is not always straightforward. A treatment might improve a biomarker without producing a noticeable benefit in symptoms or daily function, or it might cause side effects that outweigh the biological gain from patient's perspective. In some diseases, clinically relevant outcomes such as fatigue, pain, sleep, or social participation have no perfect biomarker analog at all. When decisions are based solely on biological measures, important aspects of the patient's experience can be underestimated or completely overlooked. How COAs capture the patient experience. COAs include any assessment that depends on human judgment, perception, or performance, such as PROs, clinician-reported outcomes, ClinROs, observer-reported outcomes, OBSROs, and performance outcomes. These directly address how patients feel and function in their usual lives, rather than only what can be seen in a lab or on a scan. PROs are particularly powerful because they come directly from patients without interpretation by clinicians or caregivers. They can capture symptoms, functional limitations, and quality of life in ways no external observer can fully grasp. Clinician-reported scales, caregiver reports, and performance tests complement the PROs by adding expert observation and standardized tasks that reflect real-world functioning. Together, these COAs provide a multidimensional picture that connects biological change to lived experience. So here are some examples across indications. In oncology, tumor response and progression-free survival are critical, but patients also deeply care about fatigue, nausea, cognitive effects, and the ability to work or take part in the family life. PRO data from cancer trials have shown that treatments with similar survival benefits can differ significantly in symptom burden and quality of life impact, information that directly influences shared decision making. In chronic pain and rheumatologic diseases, objective findings such as imaging or inflammatory markers often correlate imperfectly with pain intensity, functional capability, and participation in daily activities. PRO instruments and performance tests help quantify these dimensions and differentiate treatments that offer comparable biomarker changes, but different levels of real-world benefit. For rare diseases, clear biomarkers may be absent or poorly validated, while disability, development milestones, or caregiver burden are central concerns. COAs tailored to these contexts can capture subtle but meaningful changes that matter greatly to families and clinicians, even when traditional measures are insensitive across these indications. Trials that include robust COA strategies generate evidence that better informs clinicians, patients, regulators, and payers. Integrating COAs into routine trial practice. To move beyond token inclusion of COAs, study teams need to plan them as a core components of trial design rather than optional add-ons. This begins with early qualitative work to understand what aspects of the disease impact patients the most and how they define meaningful improvement. Those insights guide selection and development of fit-for-purpose instruments and the positioning of CUA-based endpoints within the overall endpoint hierarchy. Putting this into practice is equally important. Instruments must be appropriately licensed, translated, and culturally adapted for all trial regions, and any move from paper to eCOA should be supported by evidence of measurement, equivalence, and usability testing. Training for investigators, site staff, and patients help ensure standardized administration, improve completion rates, and minimize avoidable missing data. Finally, monitoring COA data in near real time, tracking completion, timing, and unusual patterns enable early intervention when implementation issues arise, protecting the integrity and interpretability of the patient's experience. So, what are the conclusions and key takeaways? The biomarkers and traditional clinical measures remain indispensable, but on their own, they cannot describe whether patients actually feel better, function better, or live better with their condition. CUAs provide the missing link by systematically capturing the patient experience and trying it to treatment exposure in a way that is analyzable, reproducible, and relevant to real world decisions. When CUAs are selected based on what matters the most to patients, rigorously developed, and thoughtfully implemented, they transform trial results from biological signals into evidence that speaks to regulators, payers, clinicians, and patients alike. Making CUAs a routine, strategic part of trial practice is therefore not just a methodology refinement, it's central to truly patient focused drug development. And that was the end of the article. Thank you very much for your attention.